So my name is Jennifer Singleton. I am the education coordinator at the Animal Welfare Office, and I will just be taking you through some details about the IACUC here at Texas A&M and how it may or will apply to funding. So the first step in the process of animal funding for today's discussion is the confirmation of that funding. Woohoo! Now what happens next? Well, if the grant includes the use of animals, we now have to go on to confirm that institutional approval. The institutional approval actually consists of adherence to both federal regulations and institutional rules. The federal regulations covering the use of live vertebrate animals include PHS policy, which is administered by the Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare, and the USDA animal welfare regulations. Texas A&M also has its own specific institutional rules and policies. The main compliance review committee for animal use here on campus is the IACUC, which is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. And all animal activities must be approved by the IACUC prior to initiation. Now, I mentioned vertebrate animals because we don't currently have either federal regulations or system rules governing the use of invertebrates. We are specifically concerned with the use of animals with a vertebral column. Activities in this context include research, teaching, or testing. And animal use includes, but is not limited to, activities where live animals of any species are used by TAMU personnel, and so that can include faculty, staff, students, or volunteers, or where that use is paid for with TAMU funds, or if there are animals that are euthanized specifically for a TAMU PI's study. Now, just to quickly cover the exclusions, the use of animals excludes the acquisition of dead animals or any other animal byproducts from other sources where there's no pre-death customization or activities that are occurring that are specific to the study. It also excludes the purchase of any meat, bones, or animal byproducts from a commercial vendor, grocery store, or Rosenthal. It excludes the legal harvest and donation of wildlife by a member of the public. So if a hunter wants to donate their harvest, that is not covered, or it's not regulated by our IACUC. And then observation of wildlife without additional manipulation. So there are a lot of instances where you do need that approval and a lot of instances where you don't. So when in doubt, please reach out to our staff and we can help you determine if IACUC review is required. Now, let's say you've confirmed that IACUC approval is needed for those activities occurring at your institution. So we can then ask, does the PI already have the grant and the associated animal activities listed on an approved protocol? If yes, the AWO, the Animal Welfare Office, will handle it. We will complete that animal compliance line in Maestro. We will reach out if we have any questions regarding the appropriate AUP or any questions about grant congruency. And in general, you don't need to worry about it, though you are, of course, free to reach out if your funding hasn't been added yet, if it just came in and it hasn't been added yet. Also, I do want to note that we get a lot of false positives. So what that means is that PIs might believe that they have that grant already listed on the AUP, but it's actually a different NIH grant, that sort of thing. So feel free to check your AUP. Now, what happens if the PI doesn't have that grant and associated animal activities listed on one of their approved protocols? Now, that means that they can have an approved protocol, but that specific grant isn't listed in the funding section. If it is not, then does the PI have a current approved protocol that fits the scope of work for this fund source? Can it be used for our purposes? Well, if yes, then the PI can amend the AUP to add that funding and any missing procedures or grants or studies if needed so that it matches the grant. Once that amendment comes in, AWO staff will update Maestro animal compliance lines when the AUP or amendment is approved. And I also wanted to note here that our staff can add the funding to the AUP with an administrative amendment if no other changes are needed. So again, if you want to reach out to our office and say, oh, this funding just came in, can you please add it to my AUP? We can do that. And that doesn't require PI sign off or anything like that. Now, what if the PI doesn't have a current protocol that fits the scope of work? Well, they will either need to submit a new AUP or join an existing AUP of another PI if the scope of work fits. But generally, a new AUP may need to be submitted. If you are submitting a new AUP, please reach out for assistance from our office so that we can help with the process and help avoid pitfalls and things that might delay approval. And then AWO staff will update that animal compliance when the AUP is approved by the IACUC. I also wanted to briefly talk about the sub-award process. So when a TAMU PI gets a grant but ends up sending some of the money to another institution to fund animal activities, we create something called an external AUP. So this term can be confusing, but basically it is a shell AUP that just confirms IACUC approval of activities at another institution. So it just acts as a placeholder in IRIS to confirm that other institution's IACUC approval. And the reason we have that is that Texas A&M still needs to make sure that TAMU funds aren't going to unapproved activities. Now, the PI, when this is happening, the PI can contact the Animal Welfare Office to initiate the external AUP process if we haven't already initiated it. And then the PI can also, to help out, they can ask that sub-awardee PI that they're working with to provide a copy of their IACUC's approval letter that was issued for the work that's covered by that sub-award. For the Animal Welfare Office, what we will do is we'll create that external AUP. We will draft a memorandum of understanding agreement with the other institution so that we can define the terms of the sub-award. Our office will perform a grant to protocol congruency check if that is needed by the funding agency, or alternately, we will confirm that check with the sub-awardee compliance staff. It depends on the grant as to who needs to perform that check. And then we will finally update animal compliance in Maestro when that process is complete. A similar but not identical process is used for IIAs, that's interinstitutional assurances. So this is when a TAMU PI sends money to a company to perform animal activities. So like, for example, custom antibody production. And in that instance, if the company does not have a PHS assurance, then we can complete this interinstitutional assurance so that they, in effect, are using our PHS assurance, which is like a program agreement with that Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare. So our IACUC issues the approval for the use of our PHS assurance, and that IIA form acts as a contract. So the form is signed after IACUC approval is granted for the AUP or the amendment. That includes the grants and activities, and then it's routed for signature. And then if needed, the Maestro is completed. And briefly, We also do handle compliance for material transfer agreements. So MTAs may require IACUC approval in that a member of our staff will check the approved AUP that's indicated for that PI to determine whether they have the relevant approvals. So a PI may require IACUC approval for the receipt of live animals, the shipment of live animals, the receipt of materials that are going to be administered to live animals, or the receipt of materials harvested directly from vertebrate animals that are specifically manipulated for the PI study. So there's a lot of instances where we may need to check compliance for something like an MTA. Finally, I have some information that will hopefully assist with the processes described and to minimize delays. Our first suggestion is, of course, to be timely. Please don't wait until the last minute to submit your AUP or amendment, including those funding amendments, because sometimes, especially if a funding amendment also involves the addition of animal activities, it could take a little while. You need to ensure that the submission is complete, including all required training and certification. So that would be for an AUP. We do want to point out that someone other than the PI can initiate new amendments. So another individual who's listed on that AUP can write those amendments, but the PI still has to submit. And a reminder, animal charges are not allowed prior to the date of IACUC approval. So we can't backdate compliance data. Hence, it is that particular date that either the AUP is approved or the amendment is approved when the compliance starts. We want to remind PIs that the grant must be listed on the AUP. So when we talk about amendments that are funding amendments, that's what we're doing, is listing the grant on the AUP. And it is okay to list more than one grant or funding source per AUP. Some PIs may have come from other institutions where they really prefer one grant per AUP. We don't do that. We would like more than one grant per AUP to reduce the total number of AUPs. And then for those just-in-time grants coming in, please reach out to our office and helps with the process, but not having IACUC approval by that deadline for federal funding does not mean that you will lose the grant. We want you to consult SRS if you have questions about just-in-time deadlines. Reach out to our office, and there are instances where we can issue approval for restricted fund disbursement, or we can negotiate that. All right. And so I just wanted to provide you with a list of our office staff. And the individuals listed in purple were the pre-approval side. It's helping with AUPs and amendments. Post-approval can help you with additional questions regarding funding after approval. And yes, with that, as mentioned, I'll be happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
So my name is Jeff Lane. I work with the Office of Biosafety. I know there's probably not a whole lot of people on here for biosafety. I know that animals and human compliance gets the majority of the questions, so I'll try and be fairly quick. Basically, just want to go over a few things. The materials that are required for approval, why are we even asking you to do those things in the first place, how to submit an IBC application. Won't necessarily go with anything that's involved with biosafety in itself. The work with biohazard agents, we have to refer to several different federal and institutional groups. So we have several books that we will have to follow through to maintain any biohazard agents on Texas A&M campus and within the system. Basically, we have to follow NH guidelines for recombinant materials. We have to follow the CDC for just general biosafety with any kind of microbiological biosafety laboratories. We follow the USDA, and then for anything that's high containment, those are kind of like the BSL-3, BSL-4 type level containment. We have to follow select agent regulations. Compliance. Basically, we know that having all these kind of permits are not always convenient, and it requires a lot of steps, more time. But there is a very definite reason for it. We can be reportable to federal authorities, result in loss of funding, obviously institutional reputation damage, exposure, or illness. For example, we do have a lab that has gotten in trouble recently and is monitored by the CDC. Early 2000, A&M did have funding suspended for a short time because of a major compliance issue. So it's not impossible that we can't not be in trouble, but we do everything we can to prevent those things from happening. In order to get compliance for the IBC, there's multiple steps. Researchers are going to identify their activities. The IBC, Institutional Biosafety Committee, is going to review those activities and set the requirements based on the research that's being done. And then the Office of Biosafety, where I work, is basically a liaison between those two. So we'll interface with any researcher, any of the staff, for any kind of training or needs for the applications to be approved and worked on. For IBC approval, A&M does require that everything is approved prior to initiation. So any bacteria, humans, animals, and plants, any human materials, blood, tissue, cell lines, can even be saliva, feces, that kind of stuff. One of the questions always comes up, well, I'm working with commercially cell lines, so it's either not that serious because they've already been checked. An example of that would be somebody on campus had commercially available cell lines that were checked, but we do know those commercial cell lines, they kind of move them through pretty fast. And as a result, they got a call a year after purchasing them that, oh, by the way, they were accidentally contaminated and ruined a significant portion of their research and had to basically start over. So while commercial cell lines are certified, that doesn't mean they're always perfect. So that's the reason why we still maintain certain levels of compliance. Any toxins, and then recombinant DNA, and that includes transgenic animals or transgenic plants. A lot of times, as Jennifer was mentioning, an IACUC protocol will be in place at the same time as an IBC protocol. So why is it necessary? The NIH guidelines. NIH guidelines is for anything recombinant DNA molecules or the materials that are going in. So recombinant organisms, as we said, the bacteria, viruses, recombinant animals, like mice and such. The reason why NIH, and we have to follow this, is the condition of funding. If even one lab on campus gets funding from the NIH, the entire Texas A&M system has to follow these guidelines, regardless of where the funding source comes from. Now, we mentioned the Texas A&M system regulations. They basically define what is required for each researcher doing work with biosafety and biohazards. And one of the things that spells out is some of the regulations are a little different for each thing about when you could start. A&M basically says you can't start anything before you get approved. And one of the rules is also basically because of that, if there's also animal compliance or human research compliance that's involved, they have to wait for our approval as well. So how do they get a IBC approval? You submit an IBC application. This is through IRIS. You'll basically click into IRIS, and at the top left of the screen is basically a button that just says I want to create a new application, and you'll get a selection for create a IBC application for research and teaching. One thing about IBC permits is one permit controls all the research that goes on within a laboratory. So we don't have to have individual permits for different projects. The principal investigator has to be faculty equivalent, and graduate students, undergrads, postdocs, any staff would fall under the guidelines of that IBC application. The IBC, as I mentioned before, everything has to be reviewed prior to the initiation of work. So having everything in line ahead of time is a great help to speed things up. So IBC approval, if you go to our website, rcbtmu.edu, you'll find the human protections, animal, and biosafety there. And there's a section for biohazards. Do I need approval? What do I need to do if I work with transgenic animals or plants? And you can also request a determination online in IRIS. It goes through the same IBC application. Once you give your basic information, there'll be a choice to whether complete a full application or just do a determination. And it's just a basic 3-question about what the work that's being done. You can submit, and we'll provide a response as quick as possible on whether a permit is needed or not. So in order to get approved, what needs to happen? Basically, anybody that's in the lab, depending on the biosafety level, has to have certain trainings required by the IBC. A lab inspection is going to have to be completed, and the IBC will approve that work before the start. The IBC applications themselves, we're going to want to know what the experiments are. We don't care as much the specificity of the research as much as how are things being manipulated in the laboratory. What are all the agents? Where is all this occurring, whether it's in the labs, animal facilities, plant facilities, growth chambers, imaging labs, that kind of stuff. If anything's being modified, and this goes even to as simple as some labs are only working with E. coli, but A&M has a rule that says anything that's biohazardous has to work. So even E. coli has to be registered with the IBC. We do have to follow certain specific waste guidelines and risk mitigations. Protective equipment, goggles, gloves, coat, biosafety cabinets, that kind of thing. So we do have 2 review processes. So there are things that if they're recombinant, they're not exempt. They do have to go to an IBC meeting that occurs on the 4th Wednesday of every month. And it's presented by the biosafety staff to the IBC, and the vote continues with that. The other option is an administrative review. This is like, especially with facilities that work with just human cells, blood, those don't require full review. The biosafety staff will work with the investigator, and then the chair or vice chair can sign off. So we can potentially move through on those fairly quickly. For training requirements, basically recombinant materials, an investigator who's the main person on the permit would have to go through NH guidelines trainings fairly quick. Anything for BSL-2 or above, you have to do biosafety training, biosafety cabinet training, occupational health, as well as every permit, there has to be proof of lab and agent specific training. And that's provided by the PI on an annual basis. And then if, again, working with human cells, human tissues, bloodborne pathogen training would also be done on a yearly basis. The permits themselves, they're valid for 3 years. An annual review is required, BSL2 level or higher, a lab inspection would occur. We just verify that all trainings and that everybody's still maintaining their lab training on a yearly basis. The IBC permits themselves are amended that once you get an active IBC permit on the IRIS page, you just scroll down to the very bottom, click on your active IBC permit. There's a selection on the left-hand side for amending your permit, which if you've got to change agents, locations, scope of work, recombinant work, and then also for personnel changes for BSL2 or higher, there's a personnel change method. Biosafety 1, we don't have specific training requirements, though we do offer training for those. And again, if anything with these aren't certain, please feel free to contact us. We have walkthroughs for the application generation, for amendments, personnel changes, and anything else. For any investigator during the work that occurs in the biosafety laboratory needs to stick with the approved application. Any changes, submit to the IBC for approval, maintain the training, as well as just compliant laboratory safety. And the role of the Office of Biosafety is not a punitive one. We're there to help on an annual basis, inspect the labs, just to remind, hey, these things may not be being done. You get used to doing something and kind of forget certain rules. Kind of the same thing with driving, forget to use turn signals, that kind of thing. We're just there to make sure, hey, gloves are on the counter. They need to be thrown out every time they're taken off. Make sure you have properly labeled materials. And then, of course, any accidents, incidents are reported to the there's now a great system in place that reports to all the facilities and gets taken up from there. Basically, we're here to protect the faculty, any of the staff, visitors that are in there, and to make sure that everything's compliant. And like I said, we just know that this is an ongoing thing, that we want to keep everybody safe, maintain the rules that are in place, and just make sure the A&M system is a good place to work for both investigators, the staff, and for all the IBC. Like I said, I will be happy to answer any questions after the presentations. If there are any basic questions, we try to keep it real simple. Any questions related to biosafety at TAMU, any questions related to IBC applications and such, IBC at TAMU, and please feel free to contact me directly.
Okay, so good morning. My name is Denise Buga, and I am here on behalf of the Texas A&M Human Research Protection Program. The Texas A&M Human Research Protection Program provides administrative support to the Texas A&M and Texas A&M University College of Dentistry Institutional Review Boards. Institutional review boards are charged with protecting the rights and welfare of human research participants and ensuring that the criteria for approval are met as defined by federal regulations. The HRBP assists the research community by serving as a liaison between the IRB and the research community. When a researcher submits a protocol for review to the IRB, an IRB coordinator works with the researcher to ensure that their protocol is ready to be reviewed by the IRB. The IRB coordinator also works with other compliance offices as needed to ensure that all applicable federal, state, and institutional requirements are met. IRB coordinators are assigned by department. The HRPP, IRBs, and the research community follow standard operating procedures and use checklists, worksheets, and templates to guide the design, conduct, review, and approval of human research. The HRPP is composed of institutional leaders, research review committees, and agents of Texas A&M University who are responsible for protecting the rights and welfare of participants in research conducted or reviewed by the university, including Texas A&M Health and all of its locations, the School of Law, and branch campuses in Galveston, Qatar. Texas A&M IRB also serves as the IRB of record for AgriLife, AgriLife Extensions, TEAS, TEACS, and TTI. An algorithm to assist with understanding whether or not an activity is human research can be found on the worksheet, Human Research Determination, HRP 3110, or rather 310, located in the IRB Policies and Procedures section of the IRB website. Investigators and support staff can use this document for guidance as to whether an activity meets either the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services or U.S. Food and Drug Administration definition of human research. Keeping in mind that the IRB makes the ultimate determination in all cases as to whether an activity constitutes human research, subject to IRB oversight. Additional guidance is provided in the SOP activities that require IRB review, HRP 093. If you have any questions about whether an activity is human research, contact the IRB office, who will provide assistance. A written determination will be provided when the request is submitted through the electronic system by the researcher. Determinations are not issued through email or phone calls. The federal regulations define research as a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation, designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. A human subject is defined by the federal regulations as a living individual about whom an investigator conducting research obtains information or biospecimens through intervention or interaction with the individual and uses, studies, or analyzes the information or biospecimens, or obtains, uses, studies, analyzes, or generates identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens. Human participants may be involved in research via interventions, interactions, or the use and analysis of private information. An intervention refers to the use of either physical or psychological procedures or manipulations of the subjects or the subject's environment. An interaction occurs via communication or interpersonal contact between the investigator and the subject. Assessing private information may involve the use of private information that is identifiable or observing or recording behavior that is considered private. This slide provides some common examples of interventions, including testing biomedical agents such as drugs and dietary supplements, testing of behavioral processes such as cognitive and behavioral therapies, testing of new or revised educational or instructional methods, and testing of human factors, which may include new novel equipment, systems, and new technologies. Listed here are common examples of interactions, which include surveys, focus groups, interviews, either face-to-face or remotely. Assessing identifiable data and or human biospecimens also requires IRB oversight. Please note that if identifiable medical records, student records, research records, blood or tissue samples are being accessed by our investigators, our office needs to be notified. To prepare a submission for IRB review, the research team must provide a research protocol that describes the background, rationale, objectives, design, and research methodology. All supporting documents, including but not limited to the informed consent document, recruitment materials, data gathering instruments, and manuals, must be provided at the time of initial review. Importantly, the submission must identify a member of the Texas A&M faculty willing to serve as principal investigator. The PI on an IRB has overall responsibility for the design, conduct, reporting, and scientific integrity of the research. Training requirements involve completing city training by all members of the research team listed on the protocol, and these documents and information must be entered into the online electronic system known as Huron. In this slide is a screen grab of an IRB application in Huron. From the study workspace, information related to the study can quickly be accessed. You can identify the status of a protocol. In this case, the study has been approved by the IRB, but if you've ever gone into Huron to look up an IRB protocol, you know, it could also say not human subject research or clarifications requested. That just has to do with the status of the submission when you access it. You can also follow the workflow of the study from pre-submission through the review process all the way to final determination. And if it has been approved, you will also note that the status will change, and you will also be able to access the outcome letter, which will tell you if the study, ultimately what the status of the study is. If you need access to the full application, select View Study. Information related to funding may be seen under the Funding tab. And lastly, quick access to study documents, including the protocol, may be found under the Documents tab. I would like to note that each IRB protocol is assigned to an IRB coordinator. IRB coordinators are assigned by department, as I previously mentioned, and you can identify the IRB coordinator assigned to a submission in the right-hand corner of the study workspace. And that is the person that you want to contact related to your submission. Every now and then we do change departments to better help our research community. And so if you send it to the person that is listed there, but you get rerouted to somebody else, please forgive us. Sometimes, we have to change coordinators in order to improve our processes. Lastly, we have the screen grab of the full IRB application. In the study funding source page, researchers can enter their Maestro funding source number. This information is pulled directly from Maestro. At this time, investigators are only able to enter a project number. Once a determination is issued for an IRB protocol, information related to the study, such as the approval status and the expiration information, will be automatically fed into Maestro. If the project is not set up at the time of initial IRB approval, investigators must submit a modification to add the Maestro project number. These steps are necessary to clear any compliance holds related to a sponsored project that involves human subject research. If there is a collaborative project where a subaward is issued to another institution, the Texas A&M research team will be asked to enter the subaward number in the IRB application via a modification. Again, information related to the IRB will be automatically fed to that project Maestro number. And with that, here is the contact information of our staff. You can reach out to any of us if you have any questions, but if you're specifically handling a department, you will want to look for that person because they're the coordinator that is best able to assist you in your inquiries. With that, thank you.